Hello and welcome back everyone, my name is Nicholas Furman. Today's video will be on the basics of the Maya interface. Now you should know that for every video moving forward I'm going to be splitting them into two sections. The first section will always cover the fundamentals and concepts behind whatever it is I'm talking about or whatever the focus of the video is, and the second section will focus more on the hands-on stuff. Now if you want to skip to those parts instead of listening to the lecture, or you just want to hear the lecture and don't want to hear the hands-on stuff, you can skip right to that using the time code that I provided here. Alright, so let's jump right into it. When we're talking about the mainstays of the Maya interface, there are probably three things every beginner should know. First is this concept of a workspace, and how the Maya interface organizes information according to whatever task you're trying to do. Second are the perspective and orthographic views that you'll be utilizing throughout the modeling process according to certain precision needs that you might have. And last are the contextual menus that allow you to quickly select the tools and functions that you need to get your job done efficiently. Alright, so let's start off with workspaces. Now Maya, like many programs such as Adobe products and Unreal and Unity and various game engines, features these detachable menus that essentially allow you to customize your UI according to whatever needs that you might have. Now all a workspace is just a preset grouping of these menus. And that's the thing about Maya, is it has various presets geared towards allowing you to do certain tasks easier. We have a workspace for, say, modeling and rigging, and then animation, and pose sculpting, and everything in between. And these can be extremely useful because they make accessible the tools that you need in order to get the job done. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about the perspective and orthographic views. Now what these two words are referring to are the two primary ways that you'll be looking at your model whenever you're modeling in Maya. Now the first and primary way that you'll be looking at things is through the perspective view. Now this is the line of sight that projects from a single point outward in a sort of cone or pyramid shape. This is how we see things through our eyes, through camera lenses, through video lenses, and so on, and is also a type of view that allows us to easily perceive depth. Now the second view, and probably the one that a beginner was less familiar with, is the orthographic view. Now this is a line of sight that projects from a 2D plane as opposed to a single point, which is weird to think about, but has a wide range of applications in both 3D modeling programs such as Maya and CAD programs for engineering. And to help demonstrate the differences between these two perspectives, I prepared a little diagram for you. Alright, so if we go into Maya, I've prepared a little bit of an example for you. Here we have the set of rectangular prisms, right? And notice we can kind of see these in depth. If we look at this straight on, however, you can see that we have these little gaps that we can notice between them, but the further we move out, we can't see those gaps anymore. That's because our point of view is being projected outward from a single point, and our line of view is being blocked by the ones in front of it there. If we move into orthographic view though, you see the gaps are perfectly clear. This is because our perspective has changed, and now it's being projected outward from a single plane. To view this another way, I've prepared another set of images here. Alright, so here's the same thing we were looking at before, just from the top-down perspective. If we imagine the perspective point of view, we would have a camera placed right down below with the line of sight projecting in a sort of triangular cone shape outward. Now if we imagine our line of sight as these arrows, you can see that while some of the arrows make it through and we can see past them, the other ones are blocked as they run into things on their way outward. This is how we perceive depth through the camera point of view like this, through the perspective view. Now when we look at things from the orthographic perspective, we can see our point of view now takes the shape of a kind of rectangle. And that bottom blue section there is where our view is being projected from. And if we look at the arrows moving outward now, you can see they move straight as opposed to moving outward from a single point like they were before. And this is why we're able to perceive the gaps between those rectangles. Our line of sight isn't being blocked like it was before. Now at face value, a point of view like this may not seem that important, but if we lock these orthographic views along the X, Y, and Z axes, then what you find is that we can start projecting images onto these views so that we can model from reference, which allows us to work from concept art and images in order to keep the right proportions in whatever it is we're modeling. So from a more engineering and mathematical point of view, these perspectives are extremely useful. So the last aspect of the Maya UI that we'll be discussing is the hotbox and quick selection tools. So while Maya has these really robust set of hotkeys that you can use to get to the tools that you need, there are a lot of commands and tools that are otherwise inaccessible by those hotkeys. And to help make up for that, Maya has introduced these series of contextual menus that you can access through the right mouse and through the spacebar that allow you to access those tools in a much faster pace. And with these, you can spend less time combing through menus and spend more time actually doing the modeling that's going to help you finish your project. Alright, so now that we understand most of our concepts, let's go ahead and open up Maya. Now I'm using 2018. You can use an older version, however it will have different tools, so just bear that in mind. And when this is opening, it may take a little longer or shorter depending on your hardware. Usually once it is open though, it will run a bit faster. Now the first thing you're going to notice whenever we start up here is that there are a fuck ton of buttons. Don't freak out though. We don't really need to know what most of these do until we get to the point where we actually need them. So it's not the end of the world if you don't quite know what they do. So one thing we can start playing around with though are these detachable menus. In most other programs, we actually have the same sort of system working where we can take a menu, peel it off, and sort of place it somewhere else. And this is no different in Maya. So we can just take these and move them wherever we might need them or want them. And we can customize our workflow depending on however we organize these. But let's say you get a little bit crazy, right? And you place this somewhere maybe it shouldn't have gone. Like over here, or I guess that kind of works. Let's say you like really screw it up somehow and it's kind of acting funky and you don't really know how to adjust it. Like there's all this extra space down here and I'm not sure how to get rid of it. Something we can do is actually reset this to the default. So if we go to Windows, Workspaces, go to Reset Maya Classic, which is our workspace, to its factory default, what you'll find is that it moves everything back to its original position. So if you're modeling or something and you accidentally peel something off and you got this over here and that's up here and somehow your basic tools get thrown somewhere you don't want them, again, just go to Workspaces, Reset to Factory Default, and that'll throw everything back where it belongs. So there's no need to freak out. Now this particular configuration of menus is called a workspace, or it's defined in Maya as a workspace. More specifically, it's called Maya Classic. If you look up at the top right, you can see the workspace that we'll be doing things in. And we have different workspace presets here depending on where we are in the process or depending on what job we're trying to do. So for just modeling, we can switch it to something like Modeling Standard and get tools that are specifically geared towards modeling. Or if we want to do some rigging, we can set it to rigging and we start getting these other tools here set specifically for rigging. Now we can't actually access these by default. It's just a little tedious to try and move the menus around where we need them. So it's usually helpful to try and set these workspaces according to what our task is. For the purposes of these tutorials, I'm going to keep it on Maya Classic. Now, if we need access to a particular menu that we may not see here, like we need a rigging tool or a texturing tool or a texturing menu that we don't have, we can go up here to Windows again, and we can go under General Editors or whichever editors we might need. And let's say the UV editor for texturing, we can actually take that, and now we can just place this wherever we need it. If we want it over here, we can set it there, and you can see it makes our viewport really tiny. So you have to be careful about which things you're trying to include, because you can find a lot of your screen real estate being used up by things that you may not need. Like things can get cluttered really quickly, so you have to be careful. And it helps to have two monitors for this, but again, that's not really set up everyone can afford. So we're just going to reset this back to factory default. And again, if you need access to a menu that you don't already have access to, all we have to do is go under Windows and find it and track it down. Okay, so now that we understand the menu system and workspaces and how to organize things in the way that we might need them, we can talk about the different views that we have at our disposal. Namely, we can talk about the perspective view and the orthographic views. Now, the perspective view is useful for looking at things with depth. I'm just going to rotate the camera around. You can see the grid moving. Now, if I created a cube, and let's say I scaled this up a little bit, you can see we get a nice sort of representation of the different sides of this cube, and it makes it very easy to just kind of tumble the camera and look at things the way we need to look at them. But if we need to be a bit more mathematical and precise, it would be useful to have an orthographic view. To access this orthographic view, all we have to do is tap spacebar, and then you see we get 3 additional viewports at our disposal. Now they don't look very different right now, and that's because the cube has the same exact dimensions on all sides mathematically. But if I were to say change this up a little bit and start messing with the dimensions, you could see the orthographic view sort of tracking that. And that's because these orthographic views are looking at the object from a single plane. This one right here, you can see is looking at it from top Y. So it's looking at it from top down from the Y axis. And if we wanted to, we could also access a camera that looks at it from the bottom, but we don't necessarily need that right now. Now the benefit of the orthographic view is that it allows the sort of unbiased look at our model from different perspectives and different projected planes. And the other benefit that we have is we can actually project different images onto these viewports, so that if we have like a reference image or concept art that we want to create our model from, we can just plant it on one of these sides, or if we have like a turnaround sheet, we can give like a front view to the front z-axis, and then we could put a side view on x, and then if we have additional reference, we could put it on the top or wherever we need it. And this allows us to very easily model to the reference. In engineering, it has a variety of other purposes as well, but if we're just focusing on games and other artistic endeavors, we don't typically need to use it for much more than that. So I'm actually going to pop back over to the perspective view here. And last thing we're going to talk about are the quick menus in the hotbox. Now you'll notice whenever we hit the spacebar like that, you see a little menu pop up there for a split second. Now if we hold that down, we have access to this thing called the hotbox. And the hotbox is designed to give us access to all of the menu options that we might not have access to otherwise. You'll see in the top left we have a similar thing to workspaces, which will basically change all these menus up here, these drop-down menus, to give us different options, depending again on our workflow and what our needs are. But if you have it on modeling and you want to access something from rigging, then you have to change it over to rigging, and then you go over to the tool and you scroll down and you try and find it, and it's just a lot of work. So a quicker way to do that would be to hold down the space button, and if we just need something from rigging, like if we want to place down a constraint, we can just go to constraint and then we can pick one of those instead of switching all those things over. So it's extremely useful to have, and it'll speed up your workflow if you manage to get the hang of using it. Now the thing about these quick select menus is that if you're not going for speed, and if that's not your primary purpose, then you may not necessarily need to bother with these for a while. If you are going for a job in the industry, or if you're trying to train yourself to create things as quickly as possible, then I highly, highly recommend using only these quick select menus and the hotbox, because it will speed up your workflow about like 10 times. It's insane how quick it can be with these things once you know where to find them. But we also have these other quick select tools here that I'm going to talk about. If you hold the right mouse button here, you get these contextual menus depending on what we have selected. Right now we have nothing selected, so we just get these two options here. Complete tool, which I'm not entirely sure what it does, to be honest, and then select all, which selects all the objects on the screen. Now once we have these things selected and we hit the right mouse button again, we have a lot more options. Basically, these are all the things that we might need to use once we have that object selected. Again, it's contextual. It's based on what we have selected and the way that we're selecting it. Now you'll find if we do this with something like face, if we switch over to the face mode and we start selecting these, we hit right mouse button, nothing really seems to change. But we have a step further that we can take this. If we hold down the shift button and then right click, now we get tools that are exclusive to faces. We can bevel it, we can wedge it or extrude from it, whatever we need to get done. Same thing applies for the other two. With edges, we get edge-based tools. With vertices, we get vertex-based tools. And this applies for other tools as well. So if we have the multi-cut tool, and we wanted to get really tool-specific stuff there, we could hold Shift Control, and then this will allow us to adjust the properties of the multi-cut tool. This only applies for certain tools. It doesn't work for every single one, but it can be really useful if you're trying to do something that you might not have access to otherwise unless you went through a bunch of menus. So like here for the wedge or the weld tool, you'll notice that whenever we weld vertices to each other, it drags that all the way over there. But if we just wanted to meet at the middle, we could set that option using our contextual menus, and we can get a lot of precision that way. But again, this is more of an advanced thing, and it won't really come into play unless you're going for speed. So if that's not your purpose, then you may not need to know about these for a while. But it is an essential function of the Maya UI, and it is useful to know that it's there. I certainly didn't know that it existed until a while ago, so it's useful to know. But that pretty much covers most of what we need to know about the Maya UI. So I'm actually going to close things out there. Again, if you have any questions about the Maya UI or there's things that you think I left out, feel free to comment down below. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the basic ways to navigate the viewport in Maya. But until next time, this is Nicholas Furman signing out, and I will see you in the next one.